You're a leech. Nobody wants you here." The words sliced through the air like a knife, silencing the entire dining room. My Nora, Sloane, sat across from me, her eyes cold and unforgiving as she delivered the blow that would shatter my world. The roast chicken I'd brought, my special recipe that everyone used to love, sat untouched between us. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." Looked at my son Damon, waiting for him to say something, anything. He just stared at his plate, fork suspended midair, refusing to meet my eyes. The silence from him hurt more than Sloane's cruel words. 60 years of life, and I'd never felt so utterly alone while surrounded by family. "I think it's time for me to go," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I carefully folded my napkin and placed it beside my barely touched plate. "Mom," Damon finally spoke, but Sloane cut him off with a sharp glare. "Let her go if she wants to," she said, already reaching for the wine bottle. "We can finally enjoy our dinner in peace." I smiled. A real smile. Not because I was happy, but because I refused to let them see me break. I'd learned long ago that dignity was sometimes all you had left. I grabbed my purse, kissed my grandchildren's heads as they looked on in confusion, and walked out the front door. The drive home was a blur. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to process what had just happened. When I finally made it home to my small bungalow, the one I'd downsized to after Richard died 3 years ago, I closed the door behind me and slid to the floor. Then, finally alone, I let the tears come. How had it come to this? I thought about all the times I'd shown up for them, watching the kids when Sloane had emergencies at work, lending them money when Damon's commission checks were delayed, even putting off my own knee surgery last year to help them with a down payment on their new car. I pulled myself up from the floor, my knees protesting after 60 years of use. The house felt emptier than usual as I moved through it, turning on lights to chase away the growing darkness. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, gray hair styled in the same bob I'd worn for decades, lines etched around my eyes and mouth from years of smiling. When had I started looking so old? The phone rang 3 times that evening. My sister Kate, my friend Margaret, and finally Damon. I let them all go to voicemail. Kate wanted to know how the dinner went. Margaret was checking if I wanted to join her book club meeting tomorrow, and Damon. His message was brief, uncertain. "Mom, I'm sorry about dinner. Sloane's been under a lot of stress with work, and, well, call me back when you can." No acknowledgement of how he'd sat there, letting his wife tear me down. No real apology. Just excuses for Sloane, as always. I deleted the message and took a sleeping pill, something I rarely did. That night, I dreamed of Richard. In my dream, he was shaking his head sadly. "Colleen," he said, "you give too much of yourself away." Even in death, he could see what I couldn't. The next morning, I woke up determined to move forward. I watered my plants, paid some bills, and tried not to think about the dinner. Around mid-afternoon, I was pulling weeds in my small garden when I heard a car door slam. Looking up, I saw Sloane marching toward my front door, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest. Even from a distance, I could see her makeup was smeared, her eyes puffy and red from crying. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves. Whatever brought Sloane to my doorstep unannounced, and in tears no less, couldn't be good. Part of me wanted to ignore her knocking, to give her a taste of the coldness she'd shown me. But 60 years of being the bigger person doesn't fade overnight. I walked around to the front just as she was pounding on my door for the 3rd time. "Sloane," I said, causing her to whirl around. Her face crumbled at the sight of me. "Colleen, she started, then broke down completely, her shoulders shaking with sobs. What's happened? I asked, keeping my distance, still raw from last night's wounds. It's Damon, she managed between gasps. He's gone. He left us. She held out her phone, showing me a text message that simply read, I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me. I stood frozen in my front yard, garden gloves still on my hands, staring at my sobbing daughter-in-law. The same woman who'd called me a leech just 24 hours ago was now on my doorstep, broken and desperate. Please, she whispered, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I have nowhere else to go. I'd always prided myself on being a good person. That's what made inviting Sloane inside so difficult. Not because I couldn't be kind, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't want to be. Come in, I finally said, removing my gardening gloves. I'll make some tea. Sloane followed me inside, her expensive heels clicking against my worn hardwood floors. She looked out of place in my modest living room with her designer clothes and perfectly highlighted hair. Even in distress, she maintained an air of superiority. What happened with Damon? I asked, filling the kettle. My hands were steady now, steadier than they'd been last night when she'd humiliated me at dinner. Sloane collapsed onto my couch, her composure crumbling. He's been having an affair, she blurted out, for months, with his assistant. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Did you know? No, I said truthfully. Damon doesn't confide in me much these days. The kettle whistled, and I poured 2 cups of chamomile tea, adding honey to mine. I remembered how Sloane had once loudly proclaimed at a family gathering that people who put honey in tea were unsophisticated. I added an extra spoonful. He cleared out our joint account, she continued, accepting the tea with trembling hands. I went to buy groceries this morning, and my card was declined. Declined? Can you imagine my humiliation? She spoke as if being embarrassed at the grocery store was the worst thing that could happen to a person. I thought about being called a leech in front of my grandchildren, but said nothing. The kids don't know yet, Sloane said, her voice dropping. What am I going to tell them? Their father abandoned them, left us with nothing. My grandchildren, Emma, 10, and Liam, 7, were the lights of my life. The thought of them hurting sent a fresh wave of pain through my chest. Where are they now? I asked. At my mother's. I told them I had errands to run. Sloane set down her untouched tea. Colleen, I need help. Just until I figure things out. I can't go to my parents. They never approved of Damon in the first place. They'll just say, I told you so. There it was, the real reason for her visit. Not to apologize for last night, but because she needed something from me. Again. What kind of help are you looking for? I asked carefully. Money, she said bluntly. Just to get us through the next few weeks. And maybe we could stay here? Just until I find Damon and sort this out. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who'd called me a leech with the one now asking to live in my home. The irony wasn't lost on me. That's a lot to ask after last night, I said quietly. Sloane had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't mean what I said. I was stressed, and you're always so perfect. Always helping, always there. It makes me feel inadequate. So you decided to hurt me? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm sorry, she whispered, and for once, it seemed genuine. I really am. But the kids, they need stability right now. The mention of my grandchildren was the key to my heart, and Sloane knew it. For them, I would endure anything, even their mother's cruelty. You and the children can stay in the guest room, I said finally. But just until you find somewhere else. And I'll need to see some effort from you, Sloane. I'm not a hotel. Relief washed over her face. Thank you, Colleen. I'll make it up to you, I promise. There's one more thing, I added. I need to look at some paperwork Damon has. The deed to this house? He's been handling my finances since your father died. Sloane hesitated, then nodded. I think he keeps everything in his home office. I could check when I go back to get our things. 3 days later, my quiet home was transformed. Toys scattered across the living room floor, animated movies played on loop, and the peaceful silence I'd grown accustomed to was replaced by the beautiful chaos of childhood. Despite everything, having Emma and Liam around filled a void I hadn't realized was there. Sloane, true to form, spent most of her time on her phone, alternating between trying to reach Damon and scrolling through social media. She'd made no mention of looking for a job or a new place to live. I found those papers you asked about, she said one evening, handing me a manila folder while simultaneously texting with one hand. I don't know if it's what you need, but it has your name on it. I waited until she'd gone to bed before opening the folder. Inside were bank statements, investment reports, and property documents, all things Richard had meticulously organized before his passing. As I flipped through the papers, a statement caught my eye. It was from the family business I'd built. With Richard, a small but successful property management company we'd planned to pass on to Damon. The numbers didn't make sense. Large sums had been withdrawn over the past 2 years, sums I'd known nothing about. Further digging revealed transfers to accounts I didn't recognize and investment ventures I'd never approved. My hands trembled as I spread the documents across my kitchen table, connecting the dots to form a picture I didn't want to see. These weren't just casual withdrawals. This was systematic, calculated. Damon had been siphoning money from the company, my company, for years. I glanced toward the guest room where my grandchildren slept peacefully, unaware that their father had not only abandoned them, but had been stealing from their grandmother. Their future. My heart raced as anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of clarity washed over me. The woman who'd walked out of that humiliating dinner was not the same woman who now sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of her son's betrayal. That woman had been willing to be a doormat, to accept cruelty in exchange for family harmony. But this woman, the one clutching bank statements that proved her own son had been robbing her blind, this woman was someone else entirely. I carefully gathered the papers and locked them in my desk drawer. Tomorrow, I would call Damon. It was time for some answers. Finding Damon wasn't difficult. For someone who claimed to be running away, he'd made little effort to hide. A quick call to our family friend who owned the lakeside cabins just outside of town confirmed my suspicion. Damon was hiding out there, needing space to think, as he'd put it. I waited until Sloane took the kids to the park before making the 20-minute drive. The entire way, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm despite the storm raging inside me. I'd spent my whole life being the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over. Not today. The cabin was small but luxurious, nestled among pine trees with a view of the lake. Damon's car sat in the driveway, next to a sleek red convertible I key. Didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. I knocked firmly on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door swung open and there stood my son, unshaven, hair disheveled, wearing a bathrobe at 2 p.m. "Mom?" His eyes widened in shock. "How did you—" "You're not as clever as you think," I said, pushing past him into the cabin. The interior smelled of whiskey and perfume. A woman's blouse was draped over the back of a chair. "Where is she?" "Who?" Damon asked, trying to block my view of the living room. "Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else," I replied. I set my purse on the counter and pulled out the manila folder. "We need to talk." Damon ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Look, I know you're upset about Sloane and the kids, but this isn't about them. Not entirely." I opened the folder, spreading out bank statements and transaction records across the kitchen counter. Care to explain this? His face paled as he recognized the documents. For a moment he considered denying it. I could see the calculation in his eyes, but then his shoulders slumped. You weren't supposed to find out, he said quietly. That's your response? Not, I'm sorry for stealing from you, or I'll pay back. Every penny? A door opened down the hallway, and a young woman appeared. Blonde, maybe 30, wearing one of Damon's old t-shirts. She froze when she saw me. I'll give you two some privacy, she murmured, retreating back to the bedroom. I turned back to my son, disappointment weighing on me like a physical burden. How much have you taken? Damon wouldn't meet my eyes. About $320,000 over the past 2 years. The number knocked the breath from my lungs. Why? Investments. Some didn't pan out. He gestured vaguely. And Sloane. She has expensive tastes. Don't you dare blame your wife for this, I said sharply. You're a grown man who stole from his mother. You never would have missed it, he snapped, anger suddenly flaring. You live like you're still scraping by in that tiny house clipping coupons. The company makes millions, but you act like we're one bad month away from bankruptcy. I stared at him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. That tiny house is my home. Those habits kept the family business afloat during tough times, allowed us to put you through college without debt. Your father and I built something that would last, that would take care of this family for generations. Well, maybe I didn't want to wait for generations, Damon muttered. Clearly, I said, gathering the papers back into the folder. And now you've left your wife and children without a penny while you hide here with. I gestured toward the bedroom. Amber, he supplied unnecessarily. And it's not what you think. Sloane and I have been over for months. She's cold, manipulative. She called me a leech at dinner, I interrupted. And you said nothing. Damon at least had the decency to look ashamed. I know, that was wrong. I should have stood up for you. Yes, you should have. I put the folder back in my purse. But that's not even the worst of your betrayals, is it? He was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? About the money? I haven't decided yet. I headed for the door but paused with my hand on the knob. But you should know that. Sloane and the children are staying with me now. They have nowhere else to go, thanks to you. Mom, wait. Damon started, but I cut him off. No, you wait. For years I've made excuses for you, covered for you, helped you out of every mess. But this? I shook my head. This is different. You didn't just steal from me. You betrayed everything your father and I taught you. Sloane pushed me to do it, he blurted out. She's been after me for years to take over the company, said you were too old to run it properly anymore. The dinner, calling you a leech. It was all part of her plan to drive you away. I froze, the revelation hitting me, like a physical blow. What? She thought if we could make you feel unwelcome enough, you'd distance yourself from the family. Then I could take over everything without you looking too closely at the books. He looked at the floor. It was her idea, but I went along with it. I'm sorry, Mom. The pieces clicked into place, the increasing hostility, the subtle comments. About my age, the way they'd systematically isolated me from family decisions. It hadn't been my imagination. And the money? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That was both of us, he admitted. We've been living beyond our means for years. The house, the cars, the private schools. None of it's actually paid for. I didn't know which was worse, that they'd been systematically robbing me, or that they'd been planning to push me out of my own life. The betrayal cut deep, leaving me hollow. Damon, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need some time to process all this. But know this, things will be different from now on. I won't be manipulated or stolen from, not even by my own son. I walked out of the cabin without looking back. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, tears stinging my eyes. I'd lost my husband 3 years ago, and now, in a different way, I'd lost my son too. But as I drove home, something shifted inside me. The sadness remained, but alongside it grew something else, a quiet, steely resolve. They had underestimated me, thought me weak because I was kind, thought me blind because I loved them. They were wrong. When I returned home, Sloane was in my kitchen feeding the children lunch. For a moment, I just stood in the doorway watching them, Emma carefully cutting her sandwich into precise triangles, Liam swinging his legs as he slurped apple juice, my grandchildren, innocent in all of this. Sloane looked up, her smile faltering as she registered my expression. "Where have you been?" "I went to see Damon," I said calmly, setting my purse on the counter. The color drained from her face. "You found him? Where is he?" "At the lake cabins." I turned to my grandchildren. "Sweethearts, could you take your lunches to the back porch? It's such a beautiful day." Once they were out of earshot, I faced Sloane directly. "I know everything." She tried for confusion. "What do you mean?" "The plan to push me out of the family. The money you both stole. The whole scheme." Sloane's expression hardened, the pretense of the devastated wife vanishing instantly. "He told you." "Yes." "And you believe him? Just like that?" She scoffed. "Damon's a liar. He's trying to put all the blame on me." "Actually, he blamed both of you," I said. "But that doesn't matter now. What matters is what happens next." Sloane crossed her arms defensively. "And what exactly is that?" I took a deep breath. "You and the children can stay here until the end of the month. That gives you 3 weeks to find a job and a place to live." "A job?" she sputtered. "I haven't worked in 10 years. And what about child support? Alimony?" "You'll need to speak with a lawyer about that. I can recommend one." Sloane's eyes narrowed. "And the company? Our house?" "The company is mine," I said firmly. "It always has been. As for your house, it's mortgaged to the hilt according to Damon. You might want to consider selling it before the bank forecloses." "You can't do this," she hissed, mindful to keep her voice down with the children nearby. "We're family." "Yes, we are," I agreed. "And family doesn't call each other leeches or steal hundreds of thousands of dollars or plot to push someone out of their own business." "I have nowhere to go," Sloane insisted, her voice rising slightly. "The children will always have a place with me," I finished for her. "But I won't be manipulated anymore, Sloane. Not by you, not by Damon." I left her standing in the kitchen, shock and anger warring on her face, and joined my grandchildren on the porch. Emma was showing Liam how to make paper airplanes from the napkins. I sat next to them, helping fold crisp edges and watching as the simple paper creations soared across the yard. That evening, after the children were asleep, I called my lawyer, Harold Zimmerman. He'd been a friend of Richard's since college and had helped us establish the business decades ago. "Colleen, it's been too long," he greeted warmly. "How are you holding up?" "That's actually why I'm calling, Harold. I need your help." I explained everything. The theft, the manipulation, the current situation with Sloane and the children. Harold listened quietly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "They took advantage of your grief," he said when I finished. "Used Richard's death as an opportunity." "I'm so sorry, Colleen." "I don't want pity," I told him. "I want a plan." Over the next week, Harold and I worked together to secure my financial future. We changed bank account access, updated the company ownership documentation, and created a proper trust for my grandchildren that neither Damon nor Sloane could touch. "What about pressing charges?" Harold asked during one of our meetings. "The theft is substantial, and we have evidence." I thought about my grandchildren, about the devastation they'd already experienced with their father's abandonment. No, I decided. But I want every penny repaid, with interest. Harold nodded. We'll make it legally binding. They won't be able to wiggle out of it. As we reconstructed my financial security, I also began rebuilding my personal life. I called Kate, my sister, and told her everything. She drove up from Phoenix the next day. I knew something was off, she said as we sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset. Every time I visited, Sloane was so controlling, always speaking over you. And Damon. He changed after he married her. I should have seen it, I sighed. Kate squeezed my hand. You were grieving Richard. They took advantage. Well, not anymore, I said firmly. With Kate's encouragement, I reached out to old friends I'd lost touch with, reconnecting over coffee or lunch. I joined a watercolor class I'd always been curious about and signed up for a community garden plot. Small steps, but each one helped me reclaim pieces of myself I'd neglected. Meanwhile, Sloane alternated between cold fury and desperate pleading. When she realized I wouldn't budge on my decisions, she began making phone calls, reaching out to family members and friends. No one will believe you over me, she warned one evening. I've already told everyone how you've lost your mind with grief, how you're paranoid and confused. I just smiled. You're welcome to try that approach. What Sloane didn't know was that I'd already spoken with most of the family, calmly explaining the situation and showing evidence where necessary. Her attempts to paint me as a confused old woman fell flat. As the end of the month approached, Sloane became increasingly desperate. She still hadn't found a job or a new place to live. The day before her deadline, she cornered me in the kitchen. I need more time, she insisted. It's impossible to find affordable housing in this market. I've found you a 2-bedroom apartment, I replied, sliding a piece of paper across the counter. It's paid through the end of the year. That should give you enough time to get back on your feet. She stared at the address, suspicion clouding her features. Why would you do this? Not for you, I said honestly. For Emma and Liam. They deserve stability. Sloane's eyes filled with unexpected tears. I don't understand you, Colleen. After everything I've done. That's the difference between us, I told her. I don't have to hurt others to feel whole. The day they moved out was bittersweet. I hugged my grandchildren tightly, promising to see them soon. Sloane watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. The apartment. Thank you, she said stiffly as she loaded the last box into her car. I nodded. There's one condition. Family therapy for you and the children. The receipts are on the kitchen counter. Therapy? Sloane frowned. We don't need... It's non-negotiable, I interrupted. The children have been through trauma. They need support, and so do you. For once, she didn't argue. As their car disappeared, down the street, I stood in my doorway feeling a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. My home was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Peaceful rather than lonely. That evening, as I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, my phone rang. It was Damon. Mom, he said, his voice hesitant. We need to talk. I agreed, to meet Damon at a small coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed his car already there, and my stomach tightened. For a moment, I sat motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel. The mother in me wanted to rush in, to fix everything, to return to the comfortable familiarity of being needed. But the woman who had emerged from the ashes of betrayal knew better. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. Damon sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee on the table. He'd already ordered my usual, hazelnut with cream, no sugar. The sight of it, this small gesture of knowing me, sent an unexpected pang through my chest. Mom, he said, standing, awkwardly as I approached. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a few days' stubble shadowing his jaw. Gone was the confident, almost arrogant man who had let his wife call me a leech without protest. "Damon," I replied, sliding into the booth. "You wanted to talk." He pushed my coffee toward me, then stared down at his own cup. "I don't know where to start." "The beginning is usually a good place," I said, leaving my coffee untouched. He took a deep breath. "Amber left. Turns out she wasn't interested in a guy with no money and legal problems." He attempted a rueful smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. No matter what he'd done, I took no pleasure in his pain. "No, you're not?" he said sharply, then immediately closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. That's not fair. None of this is your fault." "No, it's not," I agreed calmly. "I've been seeing a therapist," he continued, "trying to understand why I did what I did. To you, to Sloane, to my kids." I nodded, waiting. "He says I've been trying to live up to Dad's legacy my whole life, that I never felt good enough." Damon ran a hand through his hair. "But that's just an excuse, isn't it? Plenty of people feel inadequate without stealing or lying." "True," I said. "But understanding why you did something is the first step to not doing it again." Damon finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I miss them. Emma and Liam. Sloane won't let me see them unless I'm supervised." "Can you blame her?" "No," he admitted. "But they're still my children." "Yes, they are," I said. "And they need their father, a father they can trust, who puts their needs first." Damon's shoulders slumped. "I don't know if I can be that person." "You can be," I told him. "But it will take time and consistent effort. Trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. Like yours," he said quietly. "I've destroyed your trust in me." I didn't contradict him. "What do you want from me, Damon?" He hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "It's a repayment plan, for every penny I took, with interest. I've gotten a job at Mitchell Construction. Not glamorous, but honest work. And I'm selling the lakeside condo." I opened the envelope, scanning the document inside. It was professionally drawn up, legally binding. "Harold helped with this?" Damon nodded. "I went to him first. Thought you might be more willing to listen if he'd reviewed it." "And the company?" I asked. "Is yours," he said firmly. "I don't deserve any part of it, not after what I did. But someday, if you ever trust me again, I'd like to earn my way back." I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation, of the craftiness that had allowed him to deceive me for so long. But all I saw was exhaustion and regret. "I'm selling the house," he added when I didn't respond. "It's too big for just me anyway, and I need to start paying you back." "And Sloane?" "We're getting divorced," he sighed. "It's for the best. We were toxic together, brought out the worst in each other. I don't want my kids growing up thinking that's what a marriage should be." I finally took a sip of my coffee. It had grown cold. "I've set up a trust for Emma and Liam, for their education and future needs. Neither you nor Sloane can access it." "Good," Damon said, nodding. That's good, Mom. They should be protected, even from me." We sat in silence. For a moment, the weight of everything between us almost tangible. "I never thought I was like this," Damon finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I could hurt people I love. Especially you." He looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Did you ever suspect? Before you found those papers?" I considered the question. There were moments, small inconsistencies, things that didn't quite add up. But I trusted you completely. Perhaps too completely. "I'm so sorry," he said, a tear finally escaping. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry." "I believe you," I said softly. But you're right. It doesn't fix anything. Actions, not words, are what matter now. Damon wiped, his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you press charges? You had every right to. Because you're my son, I said simply. And because Emma and Liam need their father, not a prison inmate. I don't deserve your mercy. No, you don't, I agreed. But mercy isn't about what's deserved. It's about what's needed. As we left the coffee shop, Damon hesitated at his car. Can I hug you? He asked. So unlike the confident son I'd raised, I paused, then opened my arms. The embrace was brief, tentative, nothing like the bear hugs we used to share. But it was a beginning. I'll see you at Emma's recital next week, he asked. I'll be there, I confirmed. But Damon, no more lies, not even small ones. If you slip up again, that's it. I won't give you another chance. He nodded solemnly. I understand. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed. The wound was still too fresh for that. But as if the infection had finally been drained, allowing the real healing to begin. That evening, Sloane called. I almost didn't answer, but concern for my grandchildren won out. I took the children to therapy today, she said without preamble. The therapist, she wants to meet with you too. Why? I asked, surprised. Sloane was quiet for a moment. She thinks it would help them to see us, cooperating, being civil. Another pause. And I think she's right. All right, I agreed. Set it up and text me the details. Thank you, Sloane said, and then, unexpectedly, you were right, you know. About everything. I didn't deserve your help, but you gave it anyway. For the children. I didn't know how to respond to this sudden vulnerability from a woman who had only ever shown me contempt. The therapist says I have. Issues with older women. Sloane continued when I didn't speak. Because of my mother. It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but I'm trying to understand it. Understanding is good, I said carefully. But like I told Damon today, it's actions that matter now. You saw Damon? Surprise colored her voice. Yes. And? And that's between him and me, I said firmly. But he wants to be a better father to Emma and Liam. You should give him that chance if he earns it. Sloane sighed. I'll try, if he truly changes. After we hung up, I sat on my porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The evening air carried the scent of my neighbor's jasmine, sweet and delicate. For the first time, in months, perhaps years, I felt like myself again. Not just someone's mother or grandmother or former wife, but Colleen. A woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, more determined. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once shattered, takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. But I was willing to try, for my grandchildren's sake. And for my own. 1 year later, the community center hummed with activity as I arranged watercolor paintings along the display wall. My hands, more wrinkled now at 61, moved with practiced precision, aligning frames and adjusting lighting. Those are quite good, a voice said behind me. You have a real talent. I turned to find Martin Shelby, the retired art teacher who ran the center's programs. His kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he gestured to my landscape series. Thank you, I replied, feeling a familiar warmth in my cheeks. At my age, I should have been beyond blushing at compliments, but somehow Martin always had that effect on me. Still not as good as yours, though. Different, not better or worse, he corrected gently. Are you ready for the reception tonight? Your family coming? I nodded, arranging the last painting. My sister Kate, my grandchildren, and possibly my son and his ex-wife, if they can be civil to each other. Martin chuckled. Ah, family dynamics. Never simple, are they? No, I agreed. but better than they were. That evening, as guests filtered into the community center for the local artists' showcase, I stood by my display feeling a mixture of pride and vulnerability. These paintings, scenes from my garden, the lake at sunrise, my grandchildren playing, were pieces of my soul made visible. Kate arrived first, hugging me fiercely. "They're beautiful, Colleen. Richard would have been so proud." He always did. "Encourage my hobbies," I said, smiling at the memory of my late husband setting up an easel in our sunroom. "Said I needed something just for me." "Smart man," Kate replied, "though I don't think he expected you to become the next Grandma Moses." Before I could respond, Emma's voice rang out across the room. "Grandma, we're here!" My grandchildren rushed toward me, Liam now 8 and Emma 11, both growing too fast. Behind them walked Damon and Sloane, maintaining a careful distance from each other, but managing polite smiles. "These are yours?" Emma asked, eyes wide as she studied the paintings. "They're amazing." "Can you teach me?" Liam added, tugging at my sleeve. "Of course, sweetheart," I promised, ruffling his hair. Damon approached, looking healthier than he had in years. The physical labor at the construction company had built muscle, and regular therapy had lifted some of the darkness from his eyes. "Mom, these are incredible," he said, genuinely impressed. "I had no idea you were so talented." "There's a lot you didn't know about me," I replied without rancor. It was simply a truth we both acknowledged now. Sloane stood slightly apart, examining a painting of the children by the lake. "You captured them perfectly," she said softly. "You see them so clearly." I nodded, accepting the compliment for what it was, a small peace offering in our ongoing truce. The year had brought many changes. Damon had stuck to his repayment plan faithfully, living modestly in a small apartment and working his way up at the construction company. Our relationship was still healing, trust rebuilt slowly, brick by careful brick, but we were finding our way back to each other. Sloane had surprised everyone by returning to school for a teaching degree. The apartment I'd provided had given her the stability to reimagine her life, and working with children seemed to soften her edges. We would never be close, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully for Emma and Liam's sake. As for me, I had flourished in unexpected ways. The business continued to thrive under my leadership, with a young protege being groomed to take over someday, someone unrelated to me, chosen for merit rather than blood. I had expanded my social circle, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones through my watercolor classes and community garden. And then there was Martin, whose friendship had gradually evolved into something more. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate, just two people with full lives finding joy in shared moments. Later that evening, as the exhibition wound down, Damon helped me gather my things. "I sold 3 paintings," I told him, still somewhat amazed. "Not surprised," he said. "You've always been talented, Mom. I just never paid enough attention." I studied my son's face, seeing echoes of the boy he'd been and glimpses of the man he was becoming. "We both made mistakes, Damon." He shook his head. "No, I made mistakes. Terrible ones. You just trusted too much." "Perhaps," I conceded. "But I've learned?" "Yeah?" he said ruefully. "I think we all have." As we walked to the parking lot, Emma and Liam raced ahead, Sloane calling after them to slow down. Kate chatted with Martin about his upcoming pottery workshop. "Are you happy, Mom?" Damon asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said after a moment's reflection. "Not the same way I was before, but yes, I'm happy." "I'm glad," he said sincerely. "You deserve it." "Everyone deserves happiness, Damon. Even those who've made mistakes." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm getting there. Slowly." We reached my car, and Damon helped load my remaining paintings into the trunk. "We're still on for Sunday dinner?" I confirmed. "Wouldn't miss it," he promised. It's Liam's favorite day of the week. Mine too, actually. Our Sunday dinners had become a new tradition over the past few months. Nothing elaborate, just simple meals and family time. Sometimes Sloane joined us, sometimes not, depending on her schedule and the temperature of her relationship with Damon. The children always came, bringing laughter and chaos back into my too-quiet home. I hugged my grandchildren goodbye, promised Kate we'd meet for lunch the following week, and waved as Martin headed to his own car after confirming our plans for breakfast the next morning. Driving home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. Some betrayals cut too deep for perfect healing, but it had transformed into something more manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the eye mirror. Gray hair, lines around my eyes and mouth, hands that showed every year of hard work. But also straight shoulders, clear eyes, and the subtle curve of a smile that hadn't been there a year ago. "You were right, Richard," I said to the empty room, imagining my husband's gentle presence. "I am stronger than I thought." The next morning, I woke early, as had become my habit. I made coffee, then carried my mug out to the back porch where my newest canvas waited. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as I mixed colors on my palette. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Morning, Grandma. Can't wait to see you Sunday. Love you loads." I smiled, typing back a quick reply before returning to my painting. As my brush met canvas, capturing the day's first light, I felt it again. That sense of peaceful liberation that had gradually replaced the anger and hurt. The woman who had walked out of that humiliating dinner a year ago, the one who had smiled politely while being called a leech, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, unwilling to be diminished by anyone. Martin's car pulled into my driveway right on schedule. He waved from the driver's seat, patient as always, happy to watch me finish the delicate cloud I was painting. Added one final stroke, then set down my brush with satisfaction. The piece wasn't perfect. Nothing in life ever is. But it was authentic, honest, and mine. And that, I had finally learned, was more than enough. "Coming," I called to Martin, gathering my things. The day stretched before me, full of possibilities I had created for myself. As I locked my front door, I caught sight of the small plaque Kate had given me for my birthday, now hanging beside my entryway. It read simply, "It's never too late to become who you might have been." How right that was. At 61, I had finally become fully myself, not defined by others' expectations or limited by their perception of me, but liberated by the quiet strength that comes from standing firmly in your own truth. I stepped into the sunshine, ready for whatever came next. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.